I had a lot of objectives rhetorically for this first section. I tried to use a lot of figures of speech and establish a lighthearted ethos and try to get the audience to, well, get into this, care about what I'm talking about. So I did this a few ways. I used Jay Heinrich's. I used his like-only technique, for instance, like a hammer, but only not so hard, or however it was. I also used his Russian doll technique, which was the word sandwich wrapped in a slice of speaker, a slice of objective, and then I turned that into a like-only, just more appetizing. I tried to also cater it to my audience. I knew that there is a good possibility that whoever is listening to this particular video or watching it is not incredibly fond of the United States government, so I did a little Senate diss. And I think while those figures were supposed to be lighthearted, I think they all did have a very useful application. Like a hammer, rhetoric is a tool. Like the United States Senate, there's deliberation going on, and like the kid in the grocery store trying to get his mom to buy a piece of candy, there's persuasion. And then the next figure was where you could find rhetoric, and then the aspects of rhetoric, speaker, audience, and purpose. The next part of this video was very rhetorically charged. I gave a definition of rhetoric that I found on Wikipedia, and then I bashed Wikipedia saying that every teacher in every school in the entire world doesn't allow it as a source. So there's a few things I'm doing here. One, I'm trying to appeal to authority, the source that I give, and then I'm kind of trying to deprecate the source, I guess. And that's just kind of to continue with that lighthearted feel. I am also using hyperbole, because obviously not every teacher in every school in the world says Wikipedia is a bad source. And also, it's kind of irony, because I'm saying that Wikipedia can't be used as a source, and I'm using it as a source. But what this allows for is me to take that definition and to use the good parts, which I'm going to do later on, and to add to it saying it's an incomplete definition. Again, I go to appeals to authority. I cite two sources, Longinus and Augustine, and I pit them against each other like I did with my Wikipedia source and every teacher in the world. I think what the objective here to do is to, one, establish the fact that I have read things, but two, to make it so my listeners are relying on what I'm saying more so, or rather because I have obviously studied these sources. Whether I have or haven't is not for them to know, but at least they think I do, and I did. But this combating of sources, if you would, I think is very useful when you're trying to get people to trust you rather than maybe what you've read. After that, I tried to use some personification. While personification can often be used very seamlessly, you don't even recognize it's happening. I think what I did here was a little less so, which can be a bad thing. I wrote, once I found out rhetoric could not persuade perfectly, I locked her in the dark precipices of my mind until a valiant knight called Deliberation came and rescued her from her forgotten dungeon. I'm trying to give a little bit of personality to rhetoric, see to it that she's appreciated, and put this sense of there's no use for rhetoric, and then a use comes along in a more creative fashion. If you want to call the dungeon of my mind a self-diss, you can. I wasn't thinking about that when I wrote it, but hey, whatever happens. Next, I went into that sort of series that Jay Heinrich was talking about, where you escalate in a series. I say rhetoric is good for scenarios where mathematical certainty is not an option, and I go into a list. I say what to have for dinner, what sort of car to buy, whether or not to invade a country. This is escalating from not so important things to very important things. And then I did the opposite on the way, or talking about what rhetoric is not good for. Finding the cure for cancer, telling what color the sky is, or finding the answer to a math problem. I don't know why I went in reverse there, but that's what I did, and I think it was useful in explaining what the point of rhetoric is and what it can and cannot do. Afterwards, I try to use some repetition. I say rhetoric deals with what the best course of action is, not necessarily good or bad, but perhaps good versus better. Then 2 paragraphs down, I try to repeat that to solidify that. So I write, now that we have a basic idea of what rhetoric is, we'll go into how it is done, and perhaps in true rhetorical style, how it is done best. So I'm trying to solidify that rhetoric is not always about the absolute right versus absolute wrong, but in a series, what is good, better, or best in a particular situation. I was initially planning on inserting these rhetorical reviews, or whatever you'll call them, into the movie at the specific point. So after the first section, I would review that, and that's why I'm wearing a different colored shirt. But I decided not to do that because I felt like it would break up the video a little bit too much. So when I went into the pathos, ethos, and logos, I was planning on, after each one, explaining what my tactics were for each of those things. Like I said with pathos, I wasn't trying to get my audience to be sad or enraged by some injustice, but I was trying to engage them and get them to care about what I was saying. So by this, I tried to use comedy and figures of speech strategically throughout, so I could still get what I'm trying to say out, but I can also, as long as I'm going, keep their attention and use figures to support what I'm saying. As for ethos, isn't my name on top of the paper ethos enough? I'm just kidding, that was a bad joke. For my ethos, I tried to set up a scenario that was conducive to what I was trying to do. I have books in the background. What would have hurt my ethos is if I showed you the rest of this room, which is not so defined and or dignified. I was trying to cater it to my audience, and unfortunately my life-size Ron Paul cardboard cutout was not here right now. I left it at a friend's house, so I had to settle for books. Of course, being confident, articulate, and well-prepared is also a very good aid to your ethos. Not to say I'm all that articulate, but hey, I try. And while I tried to take a more instructive approach for this project, I think there is still plenty of room for logos. I think, if anything, logos came in this section of the video where I'm trying to explain how I used rhetoric to accomplish my goal. Because I have to somehow convince you that I used all of these techniques. I hope I did. And then I went into more appeals to authority, showing you a bunch of books that you hope that I've read, especially the textbooks. I did read those, but all the other books. And then finally I finished with some witty remarks that probably weren't even all that good, but I figure you should start and finish like a sandwich of pathos with something that is less than totally serious, and that's what I did. I hope this went well. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking to actually do more of these things in the future, probably about more specific subjects, but who knows. Anyway, thank you very much.